You're listening to the Minutes on Growth podcast, the show that brings you mindfully curated insights into relationships, spirituality, personal development, and everything in between, with your host, Tannaz Hosseinpour. Hi, everyone. It's Tannaz Hosseinpour, and welcome back to another episode of Minutes on Growth. Today, I have the lovely Miss Jane Atman with us. She is a consciousness coach. She's an intuitive healer. And honestly, I don't know if you guys can tell, but you will tell by the end of it. Her energy is just so calming and present. So I'm really excited to have her on. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I am excited to be here with you and your audience.
Okay, let's dive right in. Tell us a little bit about what you do. What is a consciousness coach? What is consciousness?
Yeah, I'm so excited to always share awareness and consciousness because so many people live in ways that are resembling limiting beliefs and the default programs that we have grown up with. And so it's kind of like I like to compare it to the iceberg. You know, kind of the tip of the iceberg is our conscious mind, our awareness, what we want, what our desires are, the goals that we set for ourselves. But the base of the iceberg, the part that's hidden and underwater and sort of really more mystical or it's just hidden, I guess I should say, but it contains our subconscious and our unconscious mind, which is kind of runs the show of our lives. So what's contained within that space are belief systems that we developed from childhood. So if we had some sort of trauma or abuse that happened in childhood, especially coming from like a parent, we can develop belief systems that were unlovable, or that we are abandoned in this world, we are alone in this world. And so these limiting beliefs can develop and they stay with us throughout our lives. And we actually run our lives based on those limiting beliefs. And so while consciously we might want something for ourselves, let's say we want a really supportive, beautiful, loving relationship, but our belief systems encompass this idea that says that's not available to us, that doesn't exist here on this plane, then we are fighting against ourselves basically to achieve that. So what I love to do is I love to help people bring all of those hidden aspects of the subconscious mind into consciousness, into awareness, because when you can see it, you don't have to be it.
I love that. When you can see it, you don't have to be it. So powerful. And so myself, I'm a relationship coach and I do a lot of mindset work. And a lot of the times I notice that people's story is literally based on their childhood story. And most of the time they're not aware of it. So my question to you is, how can we become aware of some of these limiting beliefs and some of these stories that we might have even forgotten about because they happened many, many years ago?
Yeah, it's a really good question because when we are little, our minds are very underdeveloped and we can't process things the way we can as adults. And so we take on experiences as belief. And so when you're starting to explore those inner worlds, I love to utilize triggers as information. Because when you are triggered, let's use jealousy, because that's one that most people can identify with. So let's say you're in this relationship and you're out to dinner with your significant other and you see them checking out other people in the room, and instantly you start to feel insecure about yourselves, you feel jealous, and you feel the need to correct that person or have them look at only you, or all these things that we tend to do when we're feeling insecure and we're wanting the validation that we're okay, right? So how that works is you know you're being triggered. You know this is uncomfortable. You know that you don't want to keep experiencing this. What we tend to do is try to encourage the other person to change so that we can feel okay. So what I encourage people to do is take full responsibility for their stuff. You know, what you're feeling is something that is a wound within you that is simply asking for some attention, some nurturing, and some love. And it's not going to come from that other person. It needs to come from within. So when you can identify what that wound actually is, then you can start to heal it. And triggers are the best source of information to see exactly where that wound is. So you might carry an insecurity wound, feeling like you're, again, going back to that example that we talked about earlier of being unlovable, not worthy of love, things like that. Those will carry with you throughout your life until you can start to do that inner level work to see what those are and nurture them back into a sense of wholeness.
Wow. And the work that we talk about, sometimes I've noticed in my own practice that a lot of people are hesitant to go within because it feels like there's a strong resistance within them. Where do you think that resistance comes from? What is that resistance? I mean, of course, the comfort zone is always where we want to stay, but nothing really grows there. But how can we deal with that inner resistance?
Mm-hmm. We, as humans, we don't like to do things we're not good at. Bottom line, we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to get in there. So therefore, it's easier for us just to keep trying excessively, exhaustingly, trying to change the other person because we can see something outside of ourselves. And there is an actual energetic program that exists in the old paradigm of the old energy of how we've been living in that says you don't want to go in your inner worlds. It's scary in there. There's darkness in there. There's shadow in there. You don't want to see that. And so there's this undercurrent of belief system that you don't want to go into those dark, deep, dark places. And so when you realize that there's nothing scary inside of yourself, there's nothing to fear in there. It's just wounds. It's just hurt areas that just really need love and attention and nurturing. And then you're like, oh, little girl, little sweet girl, it's okay. Let me help you. And you can start to approach it from a way that feels like you're actually helping and healing yourself as opposed to something that you're afraid of. And when people think about like an insecurity wound, sometimes it is hard to get into that vulnerability and say, I do feel insecure about myself. I do feel like I might be lacking. To look at that can feel challenging at first. But when you do, and you see that, oh my gosh, I can make permanent changes in my life by acknowledging that hurt and letting it flow through me. We don't have to amplify it. We don't have to get into all the details of why it exists there, all the players that contributed to it. Like all that is just, that will take lifetimes to clean all that stuff up. It's literally like the most efficient way to make change is to go directly into that wound and say, what do you need here? And if you're feeling unworthy of love, guess what you need? You need love from self. How can you start to show up for yourself? How can you start to feel like I'm worthy of giving myself attention? I'm worthy of honoring my needs. I'm worthy of doing the things that feel good to me. And when you can start to practice those things for yourself, then all of a sudden the world responds differently to you because your frequency now is not made up of a bunch of wounds, but it's made up of overflowing love. And so guess what shows up for you when you're in that state of being? So every change that we need to make starts within. And then when you're focusing within, then you can see how that dynamic wants to move within partnership. But when each person is taking full responsibility for themselves, you're no longer projecting on your partner, trying to get your needs met from outside of you. You're really focusing on what can I do within? Let's resolve that. And then let's see how we can grow in parallel together. It's a very different perspective.
Wow, I love something you said. You said, not getting really into the details of what happened and who was involved and really going straight to the source. And I think a lot of the time when people start doing the work, they kind of get stuck in this blaming victimhood consciousness of, well, they did this and that's why this happened. And that even, I think, exasperates the issue and makes it even feel heavier and scarier. So, in your opinion, what are some tools that can help us maybe step away from that blaming game, that victim consciousness, and be able to really go to the source easier?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question too, because, we tend to focus outwardly on all the external moving parts, and we're trying to solve a problem from looking outside of ourselves. And if we can fix this person's behavior, then we can feel better. And so I always encourage people to sort of reverse engineer their mindset, their thinking, because again, if you work with me, it's literally like, stop focusing on the details. I don't want to know anything about the details. And I'm encouraging you to also drop off the details, because when you continue to focus outside of yourself, it's serving as a distraction from what's really going on. So when people start to recognize that, oh, it's just keeping me angry, it's keeping me in resentment, it's keeping me in a space that just doesn't feel good, So what can you do instead? And I love when people are just done by the way things are working and they're just really ready to do something different, then they tend to be more open to other alternative ways of behaving. And so if you feel like I'm so intolerant to experiencing this anymore, that's a really good place to be because you're ready for some changes. So I know it sucks to be there. It's hard to be there. But when you are there, it's a good place because you can pivot and do something totally different. So acknowledging, kind of paying attention to where your thoughts are going. And if you're looping in that place that says it's his fault, I'm blaming this person and getting into that victim role, you are responsible for your thoughts and you can choose what you think. You might not feel like you can sometimes, but you always can. And I learned this a long time ago and it blew my mind. I was at a work conference and the gentleman who was presenting said there are two states of being, a beautiful state or a suffering state, and either is a choice. And I was like, there's no way that I'm in this place of suffering and I'm choosing that. But we do based on our thoughts. So when you can see that something's not working and you know that there's something within you that you can access at any time and start to nurture yourself there and see how quickly you can make changes, all of a sudden you start kind of engaging with that new practice. You see how well it works and you will never go back to the old ways of being. But really, it is just paying attention to where your thoughts are going. Start to give yourself permission to think better feeling thoughts. Start to swim in emotions that actually feel good and supportive. That changes your frequency. Therefore, that changes everything you're interacting with outside of yourself.
And what an empowering thought that we have a choice in all of this. We have a choice in how we show up to our own life and whether we choose to heal or whether we choose to kind of store that trauma, which brings me to a question of, we hear this all the time, trauma bond, intergenerational trauma, but what is trauma?
Yeah, I think, well, there's, the typical definition like big T traumas are accidents, big injuries, sexual abuse, things like that. And then there's the small T traumas, which a lot of people don't recognize that they've experienced trauma because they're thinking, well, I had never experienced sexual abuse. I was never in a car accident. But the small T traumas are those ones that are consistently in your daily environment that create a contraction or a constriction in your field. Let's say you have a father who's very demeaning of you and always cuts you down or calls you stupid. All of those things are trauma. And what happens is the trauma doesn't necessarily come from the person who's causing something or the accident or the injury. Trauma really is built from our response to life. So how we respond to that demeaning comment with like we talked about earlier, with the limiting beliefs. Let's say father comes in and says, you're stupid. You internalize, I'm stupid. No one's going to love me. That's what actually is the trauma, and how, because it's internalized, it becomes a part of us, a part of our body, of our tissues, of our vibration and our belief system. So until you can recognize that you're holding these things within your field, sometimes it's hard to release them. It's just a part of you. So you feel almost like you can't gain separation from those things because they do feel so innate to you. But when you can see how life starts to respond to you in a way that doesn't feel good, something's going on inside that is ready for some tweaking, is ready for some healing. And when you turn that over and you heal that, all of a sudden you're not drawing in people that treat you like that anymore because you don't contain that within. But what happens is when we have an original trauma wound, something that we internalize as something harmful or that hurt us, because it's a part of our vibration, anything that comes in that is resembling of that starts to compound on top of that original wound. And all of a sudden you have a massive energetic block within your system. And so that might be a big part of how life is functioning or not functioning because you've got a massive congestion in your field of flow. So that's why I love energy healing, because sometimes we don't need to see these things. We don't need to necessarily understand them. We just know that we have some energy blockages, and you start to offset that stuff, decongest it, and all of a sudden you just feel better. And life is functioning better. And you're like, what even happened? It's the easy button. So when you can understand how to kind of read your own energy, if you have physical pain, it's stuck energy. If you have emotional pain, it's stuck energy. Anytime there's pain, it's just stuck energy. So when you start to kind of recognize how to read those systems, and it's really easy, like I have pain in my heart when I think about this. Awesome. That's stuck energy. So can we send some breath there? Can we feel like we can expand through there? Can we set intentions that we're going to let that stuff go? And then all of a sudden I feel a little lighter. That worked. Holy cow. So there's so much that we can do for ourselves. It's just kind of remembering that we have all these magical powers within us, this medicine within us that we can learn to apply and help ourselves. And then we can also show up as better humans for the rest of the planet.
I love that. So, do you believe what Dr. Wayne Dyer said? We do not attract who we want or what we want, we attract what we are.
Who we are. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Because everything comes down to frequency. And I think an easy way to describe it is if you have a lot of limiting beliefs and trauma or hurts or jealousies or density in your field, it's almost like it plays itself out as like black bubbles in your field that make up your field. And so what happens is with the law of attraction, like attracts like, right? So if you're full of a lot of density and heavy feelings, you're going to continue to attract that because that's the only option. You magnetize what you are. So when you can start to see, I'm feeling really heavy, how can I help myself feel better? Can I stop working so much and just decide to go out and play with my kids? Can I surrender to the play? When you do things like that, you offset that heaviness in your field. Therefore, you automatically start to attract better feeling experiences into your life because that's what you're choosing for yourself. So we are such powerful beings. And those of you that have a life that you hate, I know you're not going to want to hear this, but you're creating it. You're such a powerful creator that by your focus on those things, you're seeing them all around you. It's amazing and fascinating. So knowing that about yourself, if you can decide, I don't want to focus on those things anymore. I don't want to interact with those things anymore. Start practicing looking for things that you do want to interact with. Start focusing on finding the evidence that all of those better feeling things exist for you and see how your life starts to change very naturally and very organically. And you are that powerful.
And again, how amazing that we always have a choice. We always have a choice to have that reality and to put in the work to create that reality. What is some of your favorite go-to activities to kind of bring you back to source, to center you and to, sometimes take off that energetic load?
To me, being out in nature is life changing. These are something that we all can do. Maybe if I grew up in Wisconsin, I'm in South Carolina now, but in the middle of winter, you might not want to get your feet in the earth. I get it. But do utilize something to be out in nature that is already in the natural rhythms of life. When you can feel like we're breaking through the chaos of the overwhelm and the to-do list and all that, but you're getting into something that organically functions without effort, it kind of activates that within your system. To me, meditation is huge because I love to feel connected to the greater sources of life. And I also love to connect with myself so I know what's going on inside of my inner worlds. So to me, nature, meditation, and being around people that I love being around, that I can thrive around, that I can be happy around and have fun. So my community is really important because they will remind me, you're being your authentic self right now because you're in a mode of play and fun and you're not excessively working. So be around people that remind you of how awesome you are. It's such an important piece of life. So it's about connecting. It's about feeling into the natural rhythms, and it's about community and play for me.
I love that. Quick question. What do you
Yeah.
do when you don't have that community? What if you feel like, your friends don't support you on this journey of healing, or people are starting to make fun of you, and people who have different mentalities and like, oh, you're acting so weird now and you're acting so hippie, or you're being so sensitive, or like, just take it easy. Like, you're making such a big deal out of it. How do we, first of all, deal with that? And how do
Yeah.
we build a more empowering community for ourselves?
Yeah, that literally is the story of my life. So, I mean, my whole life till, the decade and a half ago or whatever, was like that, where I was extremely misunderstood because of my gifts and growing up in a house that people lived in boxes. And I was always outside thinking outside of the box. So, literally, story of my life. And it's a hard place to be. It's really tough to be there where you feel like the weirdo and you feel like you're misunderstood and that no one gets it. And because people can only kind of wrap their heads around their own experience, it's hard for other people around you to necessarily embrace or be open to when your gifts start to open or when you start to open your consciousness. So it really is kind of a rite of passage to start to check in with, does this relationship align with me? Do I need to let this person in as deeply as I'm letting them in? And this is a really important piece. Am I trying to prove something to this person? Am I exerting a lot of energy trying to convince them that this is normal, that this is okay, that this is how they should be? Those are not your people. It's okay to still have relationships with them, but those are the ones that, if they're in conflict from your feelings and your knowing, maybe that person isn't the one you need to be listening to. And the more you can listen to yourself, and I know this sometimes requires a bit of isolation, just because being in your own company with your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own emotions, really getting in touch with who you are outside of this influence of others around you can help you feel more confident with where you actually are in your journey. And again, how vibration works, the more clear you are about who you are, the more you're going to attract other people in that align with that sense of beingness. So it is a transition. And it's not like all of the people in your life right now, if you're just starting this journey, probably a lot of them won't move forward with you. And some of them might, those that are also evolving. But what happens is when you start to shift and up level, anyone that's around you in your orbit automatically starts to also get touched by that. Like, oh, there's something better out there. There's something cool out there. So a lot of them might come with you. The ones that are in complete resistance, digging their heels and saying, I'm not going anywhere, those you might have to take a little detour and see if they're going to meet you later on. But it really is about honoring yourself, what you need. Stop trying to prove yourself to anyone. You don't need to do that to anyone ever, especially yourself. Honor yourself, love yourself, and see who wants to come in and love you back.
I can listen to you forever and ever. Like I just soothing sound, like I just love the tone of your voice and all the beauty that comes out of your mouth. Like honestly, it's just I love it. I love the energy.
Make me
Um,
emotional.
Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
sharing all of that. Okay, last question. Sorry,
Yeah,
I know we've gone overboard, but
that's
you
okay.
mentioned that this was literally a story of your life. So if we
Yeah.
could go back 10, 15 years, what would
Mhm.
be the one message that you would like to tell yourself then, knowing what you know now?
Mm. I would say to listen to my gut, because so many times I knew that this person, this relationship, this business, whatever, was not meant for me. And my mind and my ego would get in the way and say, but this, you wanted this and you wanted this way and this fits in this way. And so you convince yourself of things through your mind as opposed to listening to your heart and your gut. So when you're tuned into your intuitive process and that deep sense of knowing, I would say listen to it because you already know these things. It's just a matter of flexing that muscle, strengthening the muscle to where you know that you actually can trust that. And when you trust that, it's always going to lead you into the most magical places.
Beautiful. And as a facilitator, you can help people kind of strengthen that muscle, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. When we decongest all of the limiting beliefs and move through the healing of the triggers, and we start to be more of who we actually are, not all the compounding of wounds that we've been trying to function through. But when you can get in touch with who you actually are, decisions are easy because you feel them. It's either a heck yes or a heck no.
Mm.
And there's no real gray area. It's just a deep sense of knowing. And you're following that and you find all the magic on the other side. And it becomes interesting and fun and exciting. It's like this playground that you can live in just from simply honoring yourself.
It sounds so lighthearted and I don't know what the word is, but like soul expansive. Like it just sounds such an expansive process.
It is. It is for sure. Yeah, that's a beautiful word to describe it because you do go from a complete state of constriction and a lot of armor, protection, protective mechanisms, and then you drop all that stuff off and you're just in a flow. So it's such a transition. And really, we're here to experience that. So if you're finding that you are constricted and you're not really breathing deeply and you feel overwhelmed with life and you're not functioning in relationships that feel healthy, and know that it's so uncomfortable for you to be there because you're meant to work through it. You literally are meant to. That journey is supported. So you never have to walk through that alone. Just think, I'm ready for it. And when you open yourself to that readiness, all of a sudden these pieces start to file in and come in and flow in. And you're like, oh my gosh, because I set that intention, I'm ready for something different. All of a sudden this beautiful person comes into my life, or this amazing opportunity. It really is intention, mindset, and how you feel. And that's going to dictate a lot of how your life works.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And if the audience wants to get in touch with you to kind of feel the energy that I'm feeling right now, how can they do so?
Yeah, the easiest place would be to check out my website, jeanatman.com. So I've got a couple different ways that people can work with me on there. And so check it out, see what resonates.
Thank you so much, Jean, for giving us your time and for sharing your wisdom with us. It's honestly been a pleasure hearing you share all that you shared with us today.
Good. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and speak soon. Thank you for joining us this week on Minutes on Growth. If you enjoyed today's episode, then make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now.